So something that we can do is we can add breakpoints to show and hide different components at different screen sizes. So I like to use Tailwind a lot, and I've shown how to set it up in other videos. A lot of times I use Tailwind and styled components in the same project. I'm not going to do that right this second, but the reason I say that is because I've the breakpoints that I'm about to show you are the same breakpoints that Tailwind uses, and because I use a lot of them in this, or I use them in a lot of the same projects, I thought it'd be easier to set the breakpoints the same as they are in Tailwind. So in my source directory, what I'm going to do is create a new folder called utils, and then inside of there, I'm going to create a new file called breakpoints.js. Utils is good for stuff like if you're doing any like themes or global styling, things like that. Definitely, if you're trying to structure folders, there's no right or wrong way necessarily to do it. But I've found that the more I keep my things organized, the easier it is, and the less mental overhead there is. So for this, I'm going to do const size and set this to an object where my small breakpoint is going to be 640 pixels. Medium is going to be 768 pixels. Large will be 1024 pixels. And extra large will be 1280 pixels. And then I'm going to make reference to each of those. So I'm going to export a breakpoint object. Where small is equal to, and I'm using backticks here so I can inject a little JavaScript. So min width, $ curly bracket size dot sm. So this size.sm is making reference here, size.sm. I'll put a comma. I'm going to 1, 2, 3. So I did on Windows, I highlighted this. I did Shift Alt and then hit the down arrow 3 times. I'm going to highlight SM and then do Control D and then switch this to MD. Control D, LG, and then Control D, XL. And I think it's Command D on a Mac. And now I'll save this. So the reason I did it this way, I could put min width 640 pixels here, but now I know that this is going to be consistent. And if I need to make a change, I can just make that change here again without having the extra mental taxation of looking at this extra text here. Okay, so there's our breakpoints. So now in our desktop nav component, what we're going to do is import breakpoint. I think I called it breakpoint singular. Yep, singular. I can do breakpoints plural. So breakpoints, I added the S. And now my desktop nav, I'm going to do import breakpoints. And notice I have the curly braces here. That's because I exported this as a named export. And that's typically when you have files that are going to have potentially multiple exports compared to, for example, export default, where this is the only thing that I'm exporting. Therefore, I'll show you in layout, you import it without the curly braces. So without is a default export, and then with curly braces is a named export with a const. So I'm going to import that from / to go up a directory, utils / breakpoints, and save. And then down at the bottom, I'm actually going to give this styled header a display of none. So now it's gone. And then what I'll do is I'll take all of this stuff down here. So I'm going to copy, let's see, so this starts up at this backtick. So all of this underneath display none, I'm going to cut. And then what I'll do for my styled components breakpoint is I'll do @media $ curly braces breakpoint. We'll do large. So on devices that are at least 1024 pixels, @media $ breakpoint.large. I will paste everything back in and save it. Breakpoint is not defined. Looks like oh, okay, so this should be breakpoints. So we're not seeing anything yet, but if I expand this, let's see, hang on. Let's do full. Okay, nothing yet. Oh, because I need to give this a display property. It's still set to display none. So let's do display flex. And now expand it. There we go. So this is our breakpoint where here we're hitting 1024 and you can see it, and here we're not. So we don't want it to just say hello here. We want it to be our mobile nav menu. So let's take a look at how to take care of that. Remember, in our header, we just have this desktop nav menu. We took care of everything as far as styling in here. So now we're going to make a new component called MobileNav.js. And in here, we're going to do a lot of the same setup. So import React from React. We'll import link again from Gatsby. We'll import styled from styled components. And then we'll import that breakpoints utility from /utils/breakpoints. So we'll have our const mobile nav menu, and we will return a div, and we'll give it an h1 of home again. We'll then export default mobile nav menu, and then in our header, mobile nav menu, we'll import that beneath our desktop nav menu. Doesn't matter the order. So there you can see home. If I change this to mobile nav, we've got the right component. So here's an issue that you'll see right off the bat. If I expand this, oh, so you won't see it right away, but if I inspect this, you should be able to see in this div, there's mobile nav. The reason that you can't see it is because this navigation, remember we set the Z index to 10, so it's actually sitting on top of that content, which is good, but we don't want it to show up at all on these bigger devices. So that's what our breakpoint is going to be for. So what we'll do here is we're going to have a like a bar that sits across the top, and we'll have a little link to our hamburger menu here on the side. So we'll call this menu bar. And then beneath our mobile nav menu, what we'll do is we'll say const menu bar equals styled dot header. And then we'll give it some styling. So we can actually add in that breakpoint, or at media, excuse me, at media $ breakpoints dot large. So I'm saying this as breakpoints dot large because that's what we set at breakpoints dot large. We chose to display our blue and black bar. So what this is saying is at breakpoints dot large, we're going to give it a display of none. So there we'll actually hide this from the screen. We'll give it a display of none. And now we can just take care of the rest of our styling. So let's give it a height. We'll say 3 rem. We'll give it a position of fixed. We'll give it a width of 100%. A background we can say is white. We'll give it a border bottom of blue. We'll give it a Z index. We'll do 10 again. I put a comma there. That's why I'm getting an error. Semicolon. We'll give it a display of flex. We'll justify content. Space between to spread out our items. And then we'll align items center to align everything vertically. So what we're gonna do at the top here is we're going to make like a far left clickable. You could put a logo here. I'm just gonna do text. And then on the right side, we'll actually have our like icon. So we can convert this H1, and we'll say link to equals slash. We'll say home, and then we need to create our like icon and the container that it goes in. So we'll create a menu icon container, and then we'll do an actual menu icon, and we'll just have 3 empty divs inside of there. And now we're going to need to define this. So if I hit save, I'm going to get some errors because these menu icon container and menu icon have not yet been defined. So let's go ahead and take care of that. We'll do our const. Let's do our menu icon container first. And we'll make that a style div equals. And we'll give it a display of flex. Justify content of, we'll do flex end, and align items of center. And then we can do our menu icon to actually style up the hamburger menu. So we'll do const menu icon equals styled dot button. We'll give it a cursor pointer. We'll give it background transparent. No border. Display of flex. Let's see, flex direction column. So this menu icon, what we're doing is remember it's got the 3 divs, so we're basically, by giving it a display flex and then flex column, we're stacking these 3 divs. Justify content, we'll do space around to space those 3 divs. We'll give it a height of 2 rem for that whole like icon, and itself is going to be 2 rem. Outline of thin dotted. So you don't want to set outline to none for accessibility purposes. Thin dotted is one option to kind of tone down a little, you know, that default kind of bright blue. We'll give this a z-index of 11 to be one more than the menu bar itself. And then we can start actually styling up those divs. So first, let me save this. It should get rid of the errors. We're not seeing anything yet. I'll close down the inspector there. So let's style up those divs. So each of our divs, we're going to give a width. We can say 2 rem for now, and a height of 1/4. We'll say background is black. We'll say a border radius of 10 pixels, and then transform origin is going to help us when these we're going to animate these, and it's going to help them stay kind of positioned well. So there we got our bars, which is a good start. So now inside of our div tag, we're going to style the first child to transform. And so this is actually going to be dependent on the state of this button. But we don't have, if you scroll up, we don't have any state in here. So we're actually going to incorporate some state here. So in our component, we're going to do const menu open, and we'll do toggle menu open, and we'll use state false. And then we're going to want to pass that in to our icon. So since our icon, remember, is a button, we want to pass the menu open prop. So this first part, menu open equals menu open, this is passing down the menu open prop into the menu icon styled component here, so that we can, similar to the scrolling up and down on desktop to trigger the blue or black background, this will help us style up these divs so that we can rotate and change the opacity of them to make this turn into an X. So we're passing that down. And then to actually change this state, whenever you click on this button, we'll do on click, and then just inline, we'll set the menu, or sorry, toggle, get rid of that, toggle menu open to whatever the opposite state is. So if it's true, set it to false, and vice versa. Use state is not defined, so we need to import that at the top. Use state and save. So I'm clicking on it, nothing's happening. So sweet. Let's, just to show you that this is working, or just to check that this is working, let's change this background here of that div, and let's say that curly parentheses curly. Let's look at menu open. Menu open. And if menu is open, we'll say we'll say blue, and then if not, we'll say black. And if this is working correctly, then we should see this change from black to blue. So it is changing from black to blue. Let's try and make that a little bit more obvious. Let's do red. So red, cool. So that's a good start. So what we want to actually do then instead, or in addition to, if you want to do the red to close and the black to open, that's totally fine. So our first child, what we'll do is we'll set this transform property. So $, curly braces, parentheses, curly braces, menu open. We're going to take a look at that menu open property. If menu is open, or menu open is true, then we're going to rotate 45 degrees. And then if not, we'll rotate it 0 degrees. Nth child 2, we're going to do something similar, but we're also going to change the opacity. So this is first child, nth child 2, nth child 3. So the middle one, nth child 2, we're going to do something with opacity. So curly parentheses, curly, menu open. And then our arrow. If menu is open, then we're going to set that middle one to be 0 so that we don't see it. But if it's closed, if menu open is not true, then we'll set it to 1. We will also give it a little bit of movement, just as a little extra thing here. So we'll do curly parentheses, curly, menu open. And then these parentheses, we'll do arrow, menu open. So if menu open is true and this thing is hidden, as it opens, we're going to translate X, and we'll do minus 20 pixels, or we'll translate X 0. Let's see why. Okay, because this parentheses. Let's see, and then translate X. All right. So this is going to turn this middle one. It's going to fade it out and give it a little bit of movement as it transitions. And then the last child here, we're basically going to do the same thing as this. So I'm going to copy it and paste it, but it's going to rotate minus 45 degrees. So let's see how we're looking so far. All right, cool. So what's happening here, and you can't see this middle transition too much, but the top one and the bottom one are rotating to make this X, and then the middle one is kind of disappearing. All that it's just changing its opacity to 0, and then what we can do here is add a transition to actually see that transition happening a little bit more smoothly. So in our menu icon, what we can do is transition. We'll do opacity 300 milliseconds, and then transform 300 milliseconds. So we target 2 properties. Let's see, that's not working. Oh, let's try and put this in the div instead. Cool, there we go. So we put that in the div. So you can see that the animation is a little bit more smooth, and this middle one kind of shoots out, and this will kind of quote unquote pull our menu items onto the screen because they're going to be kind of tucked off to the right here. So the next thing that we need to do is actually have our links. So underneath the menu icon container, we're going to have our menu links, and then it'll be similar to our desktop nav, where we'll have an unordered list, and then we'll have list items, and then we'll have links. So we'll do a link to slash, we'll do home. Let's take a look at desktop nav. I can actually just copy the other three here. So about, projects, and contact. I'm just going to copy these three list items. And then in MobileNav, underneath list item here for home, I'll paste them in and hit save. So menu links is not defined. We haven't defined it yet. That is totally fine. We are also going to want to pass in this menu open. So when we have it closed, we're going to push these off the screen. And then when we click it open and we toggle that menu open, then we'll bring these on the screen. So we'll do menu open equals parentheses menu open. Or not parentheses, sorry, curly braces. So now let's go ahead and actually define this. So underneath, we can go underneath menu icon. We'll do const menu links equals styled dot, we can do style.nav. And let's give it a display of flex, a flex direction of column. We'll justify content center and align items center. We'll give it a background of, well, the blue again. I don't like any of these default colors, but I mean, it's fine. It'll get the point across. We're going to give it a position of absolute, a Z index, just something greater than 0. Let's do 5. We're going to position it top and right of 0. We'll give it a height. We can do 100% of the viewport height. And width, for this, let's do 100%. And then remember, we're accessing this menu open prop. So when it's open, we want to see it. When it's not open, we don't want to see it. So what we can do here is give it a transform property. $, curly braces, parentheses, curly braces, menu open. And then an arrow function, or the fat arrow. And then if menu open is true, we'll translate x 0 degrees, and then, or 0%, and then translate x 100% if menu open is false. All right, so there you see nothing on the screen, and now it brings it onto the screen. All right, so that's pretty nice. Let's inspect this in mobile and see. Should be the same. So we're not getting any side-to-side scrolling here, which is good. Sometimes if you're experiencing issues, you can play around with overflow X if you're going off, if you're seeing this bottom scroll. Okay, so now we can style this up a little bit better. Let's target our unordered list. And let's go back to our desktop nav, and we can actually, let's just take a look at all this. We can actually just probably copy all of this and clean it up a little bit. So I paste it. All right, so let's see. So we don't need display flex or align items. Don't need space around. Let's see, what else do we not need? We can actually, let's see, move this flex direction, justify content, and align items. Let's see if we cut this and paste it down here. And then do display flex. All right, so it's up here now. So that's good. Let's see if we then just double up at the top. Cool. So we have it in both. The hover's showing up here. We don't really need the hover in mobile, so we can get rid of this. And then, so it's a little bit less jarring. Let's transition that transform. So in our menu links, let's do transition transform 300 milliseconds. And now it is a lot more smooth. Cool. So to kind of recap what's happening here, so we styled everything up. We have our mobile nav here. We have our desktop nav here, but we're only seeing one at a time. So if I go bigger, now I don't see that hamburger menu anymore, and now I see our nav menu from before. And if I shrink it past our breakpoint, now I see my home link and my nav bar icon thing. So the reason that's happening, remember, is because in desktop nav, we have this breakpoint of large. So until it hits that breakpoint, the display is set to none. With mobile, the opposite is true, where we have all of this styling, but then once it does hit this breakpoint, then the display hits to none. And then in our header, we've actually imported both of these components, and each of these components takes care of itself with its own styling. So that's how I would set up and how I have set up on a variety of websites the navigation. There are definitely ways that you can do it all in one and just adjust the styling and breakpoints and that sort of thing. This is my preference, just to keep it a little bit more concise and clean and organized for me. But like I said, there are definitely ways to do it if you want to combine everything in one. So hopefully this was helpful, and appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.